Thanks, Shannon. So today we have an assortment of leaders from local environmental organizations who are going to talk about some reflections on that film and about their excellent work. So for those of you who are on the panel, Elliott, Suzie, Mary, and Raquel, if you would please come on up. Okay. In case it's hard for you to hear in the back, everyone, we are ready. So as Suzie said, my name is Alicia Hamann. I'm the Executive Director for Friends of the Eel River. Just a little bit of background on my organization. We have been around for nearly 30 years, and we are committed to the recovery of the wild and scenic Eel River, its fisheries and communities. Probably the most exciting thing that we're working on now, and probably the most exciting thing we will ever work on, is removing the 2 dams in the headwaters of the Eel. Yeah, I think this community is really fortunate to be at the center of some incredible restoration projects. We're all seeing what's happening on the Klamath. It's going really well, and those of us working on the Eel are just so excited to be following in the footprint of that project. PG&E recently proclaimed, behind closed doors, but I think I can share, that they hope the Eel River dam removal project will be the fastest dam removal that has ever happened. So it is not unrealistic to say that we'll probably start to see dam removal happen in 2028. And so we are just waiting on one other panelist. Elliott, if you're back there and you want to come on up to join us, I will begin for now by introducing our panelists. We have Raquel Ortega, who's the District Director for the Fortuna District of the California Conservation Corps. Suzie Fortner is the Executive Director for Friends of the Dunes. Mary Burke is the North Coast Regional Manager for Trout. And Elliott Dabill is the President of Friends of the Arcata Marsh. So something that all of these organizations have in common, and really anyone involved with natural resource work, is that our work is guided by the need to adapt to climate change. So that's what we're going to talk about starting off here. But first I'd like to just give each of you the opportunity to introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about the work that your organization does. So Raquel, would you like to start us off?
Sure. Can you guys hear me okay? Hi, everybody. My name is Raquel Ortega. I'm the District Director with the California Conservation Corps. Our local area, our local center is in Fortuna, and we serve from Leggett, or just south of Leggett, north to the Oregon border, and from the Pacific Ocean halfway to Redding. So we have this whole chunk of our favorite part of California. Hopefully you guys agree with me. Yeah. And we enroll young adults to try on the role of being a natural resource worker, servant, and basically they come in with as much or as little job experience as they have, and they show up ready to try it on. They work 40 hours a week. They continue their education in the evenings. They do community service on the weekends, in the evenings, and they serve as a role in the state of California as emergency response. So since 1976, when our department was established, Corps members have had a role in responding to emergencies, earthquakes, fires, floods, every single time. And so we'll be back at it again this summer for fires. We have a fire crew out of Fortuna. We also have a crew that's really focused on forestry, and our other 3 crews will be focused on salmon habitat restoration for the duration of the summer. Oh, and I should also add that we have the privilege of partnering with many people in this room and many others who are not here because we have no land management role, but what we do get to do is partner with non-government organizations, nonprofits, and our partners with, say, BLM, state parks, U.S. Forest Service, to put our crews to work so they can learn and see. Maybe they're going to love this and make it their career. Maybe they won't. Maybe they don't want ever to work outdoors ever again, but what they will do is learn to appreciate our natural lands and our natural resources and keep that with them for the rest of their lives.
And if you all just want to go on down the line, Suzie, you're up next.
Okay, can everybody hear me all right? My name is Suzie Fortner, as Alicia said. I'm the Executive Director at Friends of the Dunes. We are a nonprofit organization dedicated to the conservation of coastal environments through community-supported education and stewardship programs. We've been offering education and stewardship of coastal dune environments since 1982, starting at the Lanphier Dunes. Now our reach expands basically all of the dunes all along the Humboldt coast, which is about 42 miles of dunes from just south of Trinidad at Moonstone Beach down to the Lost Coast. So we now have a nature center out in Manila, which you should come visit if you haven't been out there before. And we are also a land manager. We are currently managing 2 properties, but we also work really closely with other land managers to offer both education and restoration programs on their properties.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mary Burke with California Trout. I'm joined here today with my colleagues over there. We've got Matt Matheny and Ashley Shannon and Katie Gurin. Where'd you go, Katie? There she is. So please join us at the table and talk to my colleagues because they will really build upon anything that I share with you up here at the panel. So California Trout is a statewide nonprofit. We have regions all the way down to San Diego, a Bay Area region, we have an Eastern Sierra region, Central Valley, Shasta, and of course the best, the North Coast region. We have been in existence for over 50 years, and we are a nonprofit that is here to try to ensure that we have healthy waters to protect resilient populations of native fish for a better California. Our work really falls into a couple of buckets. We build from the best available science, however you interpret science. We'll talk more about that. We also are really well known in our early years for our advocacy, and we have continued that and have a strong presence in Sacramento. So we bring our on-the-ground work that we do in restoration. We build projects, restore the environment from the headwaters to the ocean, and we use that information to inform our advocacy, and then we're a community partner. So we're increasingly finding ways to really integrate the work that we do into the communities in which we live.
Hello, my name is Elliott, and I am the current president for Friends of the Arcata Marsh. I'm sitting next to Mary, who is a past president of Friends of the Arcata Marsh. Can you raise your hand if you've ever walked the trails at the Arcata Marsh? Oh, I'm speaking to the choir here. All right. Do you know why the marsh was built? Yes. Show of hands? Okay, that's almost the same. Yes, if there's a toilet flushing in Arcata, it runs through the Arcata Marsh. That's our purpose. And Friends of the Arcata Marsh are there to walk on the trails every Saturday at 2 o'clock for free public tours to explain not only how the marsh is a system to clean up wastewater, but to talk about plants, invasive plants and otters that swim in the ponds and so on. It's a magnificent jewel on the North Coast, with 5 miles of trails, all kinds of wildlife, 350 species of birds fly through there each year. So our job is education, tours. We always put on free tours. There's a new one is a bicycle tour once a month. I forget which Sunday it is, forgive me. Might be the second Sunday of every month. So get your bicycle and walk around and ride around with Andy and talk about invasive plants. So our job is education. The city owns the property, so we work closely with the city and do fundraising and education and so on. So see you on the trails at the Arcata Marsh.
Thank you all. Really pleased to have all of you here today. So as I said before, something that really anyone involved in natural resources conservation is well aware of is the need to adapt our strategies to deal with climate change. For some, that looks like restoration focused on helping the landscape prepare for sea level rise or taking advantage of opportunities to reconnect habitat and restore it. For others, it might mean developing strategies to migrate or protect infrastructure like wastewater treatment, for example, or maybe even just preparing the next generation for a very different approach to natural resources work. So I was wondering if any of you want to reflect a little bit on the climate change strategies that you employ in your work. And feel free to just jump on in. We don't have to go in order. Try not to talk over each other.
Well, it's easy for the Arcata Marsh because we don't own anything. But the city of Arcata is very forward-looking. And I read a book recently on sea level rise and what communities across California are doing. And for many people in California, it's to pretend that it's not happening. Stick your head in the sand. But Arcata is not like that. They have a plan to protect South G Street, which runs right next to the marsh. They're investing right now $60 million in upgrading the Arcata Marsh, getting rid of chlorine, for example, and bringing in ultraviolet treatment to sanitize the water. And in order to not have to do that again, it would be cheaper to build higher dikes around, if you know the oxidation ponds and the treatment, the Marsh Treatment Center. Those places, if they're protected, can last into the next century. So part of our job at Friends of the Arcata Marsh is to talk about that. You know, what do people know about how fast the sea level is rising? And it's still a lot of uncertainty. And so we're fond of the idea that Arcata does not have their head in the sand and is doing something, some serious planning about what to do. Others?
Yeah, I would like to jump in. Elliott's doing a good job covering the inner bay of Humboldt, but also we need to think about our outer coastline, which is all coastal dunes, and how those will change with climate change and sea level rise that comes with climate change. So since 2016, Friends of the Dunes has been working with the Humboldt Bay National Wildlife Refuge and UC Santa Barbara and others to study how the dunes are changing over time. So at, I believe it's 73 transects along the coast, they've been very precisely measuring dune heights from the beach to the backside of the foredune. The foredune is that first dune that's closest to the ocean. And seeing how the topography of that dune is changing over time. And interestingly, there was a really heavy storm event in the winter of 2016, which took out a lot of our foredune system with, if you've seen that cliffing at the beaches, we got a lot this past winter. It's called scarping. So they saw that happen in that first winter and have been able to see how the dunes recover from that erosional event over time and been able to compare sites. There was an adaptation site up at Landfear Dunes where they had the restored dunes that were restored back in the 90s, right next to dunes that were unrestored, new property for the Humboldt Bay National Wildlife Refuge that they had not yet restored. And they watched how the changes in that foredune, how they healed from that erosional event. And overall, across the entire coastline, what we've been seeing is that restored dunes are healing faster than our unrestored dune systems. Some of you, who's familiar with the European beach grass, Ammophila arenaria? I know those C's hands are going up. So if you've seen that beach grass out there, what happens on that four-dune system when it's dominated by beach grass is that that becomes basically a wall. What we need for dunes to form is sand, obviously. We need sand in our dunes. What happens when we have deposition in the summertime is that the sand is getting stuck on the beach because it can't get up and over the Ammophila. It basically creates this barrier that the sand cannot heal itself and reform that dune system. If we want our four dunes to heal themselves from the erosional events and be able to, ultimately we want them to be able to translate inland if there is space to do so, so that we keep our dune system even with sea levels rising. And the Ammophila both prevents it from moving and traps sand on the beach, so during the next big storm, it gets washed out again. Over on my table, at the Friends of the Dunes table in the back, I have some really interesting graphs if you're interested in looking at these, and we also have the report posted to our website. But you can actually see the different beaches and the data for it's basically a graph showing the topography and how it's changed after these storm events. So really interesting stuff. We've been using this now published research to show that restoration is good for coastal resiliency. And this is not even bringing up the fact of biodiversity, right? A biodiverse dune is going to be much more resilient than one that is dominated by invasive species. Better for the pollinators, better for everything out there. So that is helping fund some much more restoration of our coastline. So we're taking on a really massive restoration project right now. That is the entire four-dune system at our Nature Center property in Manila that's owned by Friends of the Dunes, and also the Wadash unit up at the Lanfear Dunes, which is the new addition to the north of Lanfear. It's probably the biggest restoration project in one swoop that we've done in a very long time. So you can come out and see that work for yourself, and we can already see the native plants and the native pollinators starting to come back, and our dunes starting to heal from all those winter storms that we just saw. I could go on and on about this topic, so feel free to come to my table later and chat with me about it, but I'll let somebody else chime in.
So, okay. I try to think about this in terms of short-term, long-term. So for our program and our young adults, they're getting the opportunity to learn about this hands-on. We have amazing partners who are very, very smart and have lots to say about what is at the forefront of science and even experimental studies. And our crews get to participate in that simply by being the labor in those forces. We have the opportunity at times to bring funding from the state to the North Coast to fund our crews for that labor, things like fuel reduction work, forestry work, and we want to be able to also think about the future when we say we want our members to have the opportunity to learn and decide if this is the field for them, then take advantage of our local colleges and take advantage of continuing their education. So, while we offer scholarships for any accredited university or college, ultimately we're also guiding them and asking our partners to help talk about how they got to the point where they are now, so that our folks, our members, our young adults can envision themselves in these roles as well and take up the next generation of carrying on this important work.
So how to talk about climate change. First, I'll say it's not a topic that I often lead with. I just want to be transparent. I'm a project manager, so one of my skills is bringing experts into a room and getting them to talk. So my colleagues, Katie Gurin in particular, has done some great thinking on climate change from both past and present work with Trout. And but how I would approach this topic, so talk to her if you get a chance after the panel discussion for more specifics about climate change. But how to approach it from, my position is, so Trout, we center on fish, right? And fish need what to exist? They need water. So across the state, it looks very different how the organization is looking to address climate change impacts. It could be restoring mountain meadows, so that we get that rich wetland that holds water for longer. In fact, across the state, we like to really focus on floodplain habitat reconnection. So the thing that comes up for me is climate change science. Science is all about rethinking and adapting to changes in the way we understand things. So it's fundamentally getting ahead of what these changes look like. And so I'll say, as an organization, we've gone from being primarily advocacy-based to then entering this world of walking the talk, right? So we came from understanding fish and fish needs, and then we started doing restoration projects, and we found we had a lot of success in bringing state and federal dollars to get projects done on the ground. And I would say now, and in that process, we also developed the SOS report. And back there at our table, we have this copy of the report. It's a beautiful tabletop version of all of the state's fishes and tells you all about their threats. And you could guess what the biggest threat is to all of our native fish, right? Climate change. But how do we address it? So first of all, we are trying to bring public dollars to getting projects done. And secondly, we are increasingly trying to line our work up with IPCC guidance, so that we can take global policy down to a local level. And I would say that's aspirational, right? And we're learning, like many of our partners, how to bring that best science into focus. And additionally, I'll say that, science is something that we're continuing to define, right? Who are the experts in the room, and what do we have to learn from non-traditional science partners like our local indigenous community? So that's what I'd say about how we're working on climate change.
Thanks, everyone. So in the film we just watched, they discuss the idea that nature has inherent rights to exist, not just as a benefit to humanity, but really just for its own sake. It's a holistic recognition that life, all ecosystems are connected, intertwined, even interdependent. And I'm wondering if that concept contributes to any of your work. How do you feel that the ideological approach that nature has inherent rights differs in the world of natural resource protection from the approach that has kind of been the standard, which is trying to limit the harms that humanity causes, or even maybe to maximize ecosystem benefits, it's worth it to save the bees because they pollinate our crops, or things like that. Do any of your organizations really work from a nature has inherent rights perspective? Or do you wish that they did?
Well, I guess I could lead off here. One of Trout, like I've said, our work in the policy and legislative realm founded the organization, and so we have used the public trust doctrine to make some big changes, like specifically in Mono Basin, making sure that water is protected in stream. So fundamentally using the public trust doctrine has been one of the ways Trout approaches this. And I would say personally, working closely with, mostly on one of my projects with the Yurok tribe, I'm starting to be in positions where I can see how and experience how it is about us as a part of ecology, that we're so interconnected and intertwined that separating out the rights of nature from the rights of humans is sort of a disconnect that doesn't need to exist. So I guess in my thinking of like how we can move in the future is that fundamentally tying the rights of nature into everything we do. I guess I would say that on a larger scale, Elliott said earlier, say something controversial, Mary. You know, on a larger scale, like the systems at play don't necessarily give all of us the opportunity to put our votes and our weight behind the rights of nature, you know? It'd be nice to be able to make a political choice that really lines up with our values to center the rights of nature in how, you know, how our systems work. Yeah.
I can't argue with that.
Come on.
At the Arcata Marsh, we walk and talk about plants and animals all the time. There's a great book out there called The History of the Human Brain, and it's a summary of how we got to looking and acting the way we are. And I'm talking back 400 million years. What comes clear toward the end of that book is that we were not created out of nothing. We evolved from creatures that already live. And if that's true, they are us. Whether it's birds, you can name the bones on a bird's wing and identify them as easily as the bones in your own arm. So they are us. And it's fun to work at a place where nature is in the front of our minds and talk to people who walk the trails. And if you know wild radish, it's part of what used to be called the cruciferous family of plants. There's a grocery store of plant material that we take home from the grocery store every week that all came from the mustard family. And we've been eating them and we've been changing them over thousands of years at least. And so it seems to me that the family of plants and animals is just that, a family. And where I volunteer at the Arcata Marsh, we're very close to not only teaching and talking about the importance of animal life, but protecting them, as the question suggested. For example, there's a research team at the university studying otters. And you may know that over the last couple of years, 4 different otters have been run over by traffic on I Street, which we can do something about, and on the freeway, which perhaps we can't. So the city is putting in speed bumps to try to protect the otters, and we're going to put up signage to identify where they cross from one body of water to the next. So for us, it's easy. We love the details of knowing the different plants and animals and talking about them with people, and it's an easy step from there to recognize their rights to exist. Okay.
Yeah, I would just say, yes, nature has inherent rights. I believe that on a personal level, and I think that, you know, my values around that are really what ultimately brought me to Humboldt to begin with, and for graduate school, and then also brought me to the organization of Friends of the Dunes, because I felt that this was a community that, I mean, it's in the name, right? Friends of the Dunes, that sees that inherent value in nature. And that's something I've always been very passionate about, is like, how do we inspire our next generation to really see that value that nature has on its own without anything that it's contributing to us as humans. But I will reiterate what both Elliott and Mary had kind of said, was that humans are a part of this, right? We are a part of nature. That's another side of it, is that seeing that we are intertwined with all of this, and whether or not it pays a direct benefit to us, it's important that all of this exists. I think Friends of the Dunes is very much in the business of connecting people with nature, And we believe that you must love something in order to protect it. So ultimately, to have those rights of nature protected, we need people to fall in love with these wild places, to fall in love with these environments. And anybody who's been out to the dunes and seen, the 40 species of bees out there, I would have a hard time arguing that there's no value in that in and of itself. So yes, nature does have inherent rights, and I don't speak for the organization as a whole, but I think that a lot of people within the Friends of the Dunes community are drawn to our cause because they see that value.
This is so complicated. I would say that I certainly agree with nature has rights, and you disrespect nature, and we have destructive retribution. I think we see it in terrible form. So in terms of our organization, the CCC is not a land management organization. So I would say the closest thing that we approximate to sort of tackling this thought exercise and discussion would be, learning about leave no trace and recognizing that, just because you come to a place doesn't mean you get to just leave your mark on it. And in fact, maybe it's better you don't, and that you leave it as it was, because it is its own thing, and leave it better if you can. I would say the other thing to think about, or that I think about, is that perhaps that's the spirit behind things like CEQA and permitting and things that we do here in California to help, lessen the harm. This is the spirit behind it, right? That there's inherent rights and value in these places that we are temporarily here for, and so there's a certain amount of respect that should be given. I like to think that we get to think through this, and this is not a 2-second conversation, but even having the conversation with our members and our staff is part of our goal and our mission to better our communities for the future.
I really appreciate all your thoughtful reflection on that. So in the film we just watched, in Ecuador, a key strategy to success for the institutions that were featured is to work closely with local people. I know that's important in our region as well. At least groups like mine, Friends of the Eel River, we work closely with a broad diversity of all kinds of stakeholders. People who are in the recreational or commercial fishing industries, tribes, recreationists of all sorts, anyone who wants to be in the river, we're working with them. And so I'm just wondering, I know that these groups up here are all excellent collaborators. Do you all want to touch on some of the ways that you collaborate with different communities in our region?
Sure, I'll jump in. We have lots of collaborations. I would say one is like the community itself. We're very much a community-supported organization. And so we just have community members come out and do a vast majority of the restoration work and the education programs out on our properties. But we do work really closely with all of our coastal land managers, anyone who owns land that contains dunes or coastal land. We have teamed up with the CCC quite a bit. We just did a CalNat course with them 2 weeks ago. That was super fun, but they also are doing a lot of the restoration out there in the dunes, pulling out that Ammophila. Thank you, CCCs. And we are working really closely with the Wiyot tribe. Right now, we are working on a land back project, so hopefully there'll be more about that in the news relatively soon. All these other, I'm just looking around the room and seeing like all of these other organizations, all these environmental organizations. I really appreciate the community of Humboldt for, I believe that we have the highest per capita of nonprofits in California, but still there's so many passionate people and so many great projects out there. So we've teamed up with a lot of these various organizations. We also have a Dunes cooperative group that meets on a quarterly basis where we talk about land management practices, on all levels, from nonprofit to federal and state agencies to local municipalities. So we're working together to share all this research that we're doing and all the work that we're doing out on our coastal dunes.
I'll try not to list off everybody, but I will say that I am remiss in not mentioning that when I said we'll be spending the summer doing in-stream salmon habitat restoration work, we're going to be working with Isaac over there at the, at the earwig table, a huge star of our summer. And great partner. And so I would say, you know, we have the benefit of not being responsible for a particular piece of or parcel of land, but we get to say, hey, we're here to help, and how do we collaborate? And so we're really blessed on the North Coast and in this area to have so many people doing incredible work. And so we look for those opportunities all over, and happy to help volunteer and to contract and do all that stuff. And so beyond the work that is of public service and conservation and restoration work, we also collaborate with College of the Redwoods. We have collaborated in the past with Cal Poly, and then, of course, community organizations, simply just to keep volunteer events in the community going so that we can be part of this community and also in service to our young adults that come from all over the state of California and sometimes from outside of California, so they can experience all the things we have here that are so great.
Well, at the Arcata Marsh, we deal with the public all the time. So anyone that wants to go on a Saturday, free Saturday tour, 2 o'clock, rain or shine, you're welcome. And to make sure that we have docents that understand both the wildlife and plant life and the operation of the marsh itself, we love collaborating with many of the organizations that are here today. Our docent training had folks from CNPS, and Pete back there helped construct the native plant garden that we have. Ken Burton is in the audience, and if you want to know about birds, you can do no better than to link up with him. By the way, there's a new book that Ken Burton just wrote and is out now. I'm looking forward to getting my copy. So our collaboration is all about educating everybody that comes to the marsh that we can get a hold of and wants to know something, wants to know more. Okay.
Well, I'll try to keep this short, but this is like my favorite topic. So as I mentioned before, you know, I'm a project manager, I'm a team builder. So as we enter a project, we get to pull people together and figure out, like, how are we going to approach this? So it fundamentally involves our community. I mean, it involves the community of agency professionals that come to the table. It involves landowners, be it private, nonprofit, federal, state, you know, whoever land we're working on. And then one of my favorite things is to introduce our project team, which is all the local consultants who have built their careers in this area and bring incredible knowledge to the table and passion beyond belief to bring, you know, their design thinking, how to move through compliance, and how to bring the best possible project forward. And our local tribes, like, we are still learning how to be in right relation with our local tribal communities. So not just that we can't go early enough to the tribes to talk about new concepts for projects. So we're learning how to be the best partner possible by developing the relationship with tribal governments. And we're also learning, you know, that tribal governments is the government side of tribes, but working with local indigenous peoples in any way possible. I believe we can talk about our projects, right? There's one that's really close to my heart. It's actually very close to my home in McKinleyville, at the end of School Road at Ocean Drive. There is a project where we were able to bring in Almy Allen, local indigenous artist, cultural practitioner, and just opening the door and saying, what do you vision for this place, for these interpretive signs and, you know, on this landscape? And I have the privilege of watching him engage with the landscape and have a dialogue, and you can go visit that place and see what came up for him. It's a beautiful physical presence that he brought that really speaks to the Aboriginal land of the Wiyot people. There's a lot of lessons still in a project like that I continue to learn about how to work with our Indigenous community. So collaboration for me, it's how do you do it? You know, it's bringing people to the table around shared interests and values. It's discovering things together, going through the process of really exploring and sharing a learning experience, and then finding if you're ready to take collective action. And one of the projects that we just went through this process on, that we are almost ready to launch, is the Redwood Creek Estuary. And any of you, fish lovers in the room might understand that the Redwood Creek Estuary has long been, a real priority for especially coho and Chinook populations. It's a really special spot. So we are getting ready to launch a project to look at restoring the Redwood Creek Estuary. And we used that process, and it brought together parties who hadn't found a way forward. So I'm a big advocate for this specific process. It's like the science of collaboration. I'd be happy to talk more about it with any of you that are interested. So thanks for the question.
Yes, thank you, Mary.
Good news.
I just want to go off script for a moment before I ask my final question and just elaborate on something Mary said about, many of our organizations, I would guess probably every single organization in this room has the experience of working with tribes, collaborating on projects, but something that I've been learning recently is the importance of working with unrecognized Indigenous people as well. There are so many, particularly in the Eel watershed, so many Native people who are not part of state or federally recognized tribes. And so it's really up to all of us to kind of put that extra effort in to make sure that truly all voices are heard, even if you're not represented by a government-to-government, legally required consultation, which is very important, has its place, but there's something really to be said for those personal relationships that you build in these collaborative processes. And I think like Mary put it very well, we are all learning on this ongoing process. So Mary also kicked us off nicely into just my final question, which is I want to hear a little bit about what really inspires you all. The next two films that we're going to watch highlight some conservation work that I think is highly relevant and really exciting in this region, both about dams. First, we're going to see Shane Anderson's film, Guardians of the River, about the Native people who have always protected the Klamath River and worked tirelessly to accomplish the incredible feats we're seeing right now. And second, we're going to see a film about returning beavers, those kind of ecosystem engineers and dam builders that our watersheds actually need. So if each of you just want to close us out by highlighting something your organization's working on that really inspires you, I'd love to hear it.
I could just add real quick, because I already spoke a little bit about some of the projects, but one that is really inspiring for me is I've had a chance to work on up in Prairie Creek on an old mill site, and sort of taking that mill site off of the landscape and restoring Prairie Creek. It's going to eventually be open to the public. It'll be a trail hub, and it's a restored section of Prairie Creek. But recently it was announced Save the Redwoods League, as the property owner, who was going to transfer this property to the national parks, worked with the national parks to make the decision to transfer this property to the Yurok tribe. So we've been, with somebody, So this parcel is where the Yurok tribe and their fisheries department and construction corporation have been building and restoring this area, and they're doing it within their own Aboriginal lands and as the eventual stewards of the property. And the good news is it will be open to the public in early 2026.
Well, for inspiration, I really like the practicality of working and volunteering at the Arcata Marsh. people have always needed to solve the problem of what do you do with wastewater. I mean, if you're a civilization or a community anywhere in the world, you have to solve that problem. So here's one that decided for the first time to do it by running wastewater through marshes. It's a practical solution. It uses nature the way it works to handle this problem, and now there's a $60 million project to upgrade that so that we'll have it more in the future. Who would have thought that you could treat wastewater and turn it into a city park where people actually want to walk and ride their bicycle and talk about the funny smell coming out of the ponds? I love that, and for all the docents that you meet at the Arcata Marsh, you get to talk about those important issues, but also sea level rise and what's the name of that plant, and what about that bird that just flew into the trees? So it's a nice mixture of ideology and the nature that exists right there at your feet.
There are so many things that it's hard for me to choose. I've already talked about our research around dune movement, coastal resiliency, and our restoration efforts, but really my heart lies in our education programs. Friends of the Dunes does a lot of education programs for all ages, and it's very fresh in my mind because I just taught a California Naturalist course for the 25 core members, and it's so inspiring to see them discover this dune diversity. And we went out to the Lanphier dunes, and I talked about how these dunes were restored by CCC members 30 years ago, and showed them pictures from the 90s of the core members out there restoring, taking out the beach grass to go out there and see the diversity that's out there at the Lanphier dunes now is just amazing. So I think our education programs, our school education programs, we just had 50 kids from Jacoby Creek School out in the dunes today. So seeing these next generations, and I mean our current generations, falling in love with these coastal environments, and really being inspired to do the work and potentially go into careers in conservation from there. That's really inspiring to me to see that.
Okay, I might have just passed out. She said 30 years ago and 90s, and I just blacked out for a second. I'm back. So what inspires me is just the opportunities we get to offer our young adults, coming from all over and joining. We have centers throughout the state, so this idea of opportunities to collaborate with people, and we're here to be of service. So as science changes and as the needs change, and as we're trying to figure out what the next priority is for the state of California and all of us as residents here, and what would be most powerful for that, it's really encouraging to me. So whether it's what we're doing in Fortuna of doing trail work all summer and in-stream habitat restoration, we have a fire crew, like I said, or participating in our special programs. Back at our table, we have representatives from our Backcountry Trails program, where young adults go into the middle of nowhere to build trail with their hands and hand tools for 5.5 months. There's no Wi-Fi, there's no cell phone service, they're just out there. And they just started, they just left last week. And our other program back there, you can talk to our representatives about the Watershed Stewards program, where they place our core members in with resource professionals to learn about anadromous watersheds and the science behind that, all while doing community service and engaging the community, engaging the community in restoration projects, which you may have seen advertised locally here. They're usually called waves, and you'll see a little AmeriCorps symbol and CCC symbol. And so if you see any of that, or you have questions, love to talk to you guys about it. But working with these young adults and providing these opportunities as a staff member and as a team, I think is incredible for me, and I'm honored to do so.
Well, I just want to say thank you to our panel participants here. We are running a little behind schedule, so I'm not going to take any questions from the audience, but you can talk to the four of them, myself, or any of the other wonderful organizations here while we watch these next two films.